people came through this very large doorway, they walked down a couple of steps, and then they had this kind of earthen embankment. In a way, it was like a bank of a river. And then they would descend into the water itself, and there they could be baptized. They could simply immerse themselves in water. And I'd like to show you something really interesting. If you come up over here, you'll see that on the top of this stone, this is a replica jug which we placed here. But on top of the stone is this groove here. And this groove is in the shape of a right foot, and it's for the placing of the right foot inside. And then a person would take the jug and then pour over the foot the oil and anoint the foot.
Do you feel that there's been an attempt to downplay the role of John and John's work as a baptizer in the New Testament?
Clearly, those who are dealing with the writing of the Gospels are interested in the Jesus story. That's their goal. And they're only interested in John the Baptist insofar as it helps along the story. And of course, there are certain sort of elements there that they want to downplay in order to show that Jesus is the prominent figure and that John the Baptist is the precursor, the one who is waiting there in the wings, preparing everything for the time that Jesus will arrive. But there is an interesting relationship between John and Jesus, and really the career of Jesus only blooms, if I may put it that way, after the death of John the Baptist, that John the Baptist is clearly in command up to that point.
But the Bible editors felt otherwise, and wherever possible, they tried to write John out of the story. This process is most blatant in the biblical accounts of Jesus' baptism.
In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan.
We take the earliest gospel, Mark, and we simply have the recorded fact that Jesus went down to the Jordan and was baptized by John, and he too got the calling, and that's simply all that is said.
In the next gospel, the story is already beginning to change.
Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to John to be baptized by him. John would have prevented him, saying, "I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?"
Although it mentions John baptizing Jesus here in the Jordan River, John is said to protest that he is not worthy of such a task.
And then you get Luke, which is the third in line, and what does he do? He doesn't even mention that John baptized Jesus. It's very subtle.
Now, when all the people were baptized, and when Jesus also had been baptized and was praying, the heavens opened.
And you think, well, wonder who baptized him. And then you get to the fourth stage, which is the latest, Gospel of John, and there's no baptism mentioned at all.
Where John baptized Jesus?
Yes, here.
This side.
The standard way of looking at it is Jesus is the main character, and he goes out to meet John, and John simply introduces him, almost like on the side of a stage. He says, "Here's Jesus," and then he walks off. But if you understand it in its context, it's actually flipped around. It's the opposite. John is the prophet. In fact, Jesus said, "You think he's a prophet? He's more than a prophet."
So who was greater, Jesus or John?
Same.
They were the same.
Yes.
You think they were the same? They were both prophets. Jesus couldn't be greater than John.
For me, it's the same.
For you, it's the same.
Ever since Jesus was declared God, the Church has struggled with the balance between his divine and human natures. And it is the divine that has won out. The losers were John the Baptist and the rest of his blood family.
Tony Blair.
Tony Blair.
The son here.
His son was baptized here.
Yes, here. And this.
Oh, that's good. That's good. He needs all the help he can get. You take care.
In traditional Christmas scenes all over the world, the Holy Family is always depicted as just three people: Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. But deep in the Judean desert, there is an ancient monastery that has a very unusual icon that includes a mysterious fourth member of the Holy Family.
Hello. Hello, are you the priest? I'm looking for some pictures that you have of the Holy Family's flight into Egypt.
For the last 2,000 years, the Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches have done their best to hide a scandal at the heart of the Christian story. It concerns Jesus' blood family, and in particular, the role of his eldest brother, James.
Oh, right, yeah. Who is there? Who are the people there? Mary, yeah.
Mary.
Jesus Christos.
Jesus, yeah.
Iosif και Ιάκωβος.
Or James.
James.
So, who is James?
Αδελφός του Χριστού. Αδελφός τον λένε.
He's like the brother of Jesus. Like his brother, but he's not his brother.
It seems to me that this is very confusing.
Ναι, από την ήταν και του Ιωσήφ.
Ah, sorry. Oh, Joseph, father Jacob.
Yes. Okay, so Joseph is the father of James,
Yeah.
but Mary is not the mother of James.
Mary, she's the mother of Jesus.
Right, okay. You're saying that James is the son of Joseph, but Mary is not his mother. But it's still fascinating because it's a picture of the Holy Family and there are 4 of them.
Despite the church's best efforts to deny his blood relationship to Jesus, I believe James is one of the most important figures in early Christianity, at least as significant as its traditional founders, Peter and Paul.
Paul refers to James as the first of the 3 figures he calls the pillars of the Jerusalem church, James, Peter and John. Puts James first, even before Peter, in that context. I think if you look hard at the New Testament, you can see that James really was as important a figure as Peter and Paul.
Hidden away in Jerusalem is an Armenian cathedral dedicated to the memory of Jesus' brother James. It is supposed to be built on the site of his tomb. When Jesus died, his new movement needed a successor to take over. The non-biblical historical sources are almost unanimous as to the identity of this new leader.
The disciples said to Jesus, "We know that you're going to leave us. Who will be our leader?" Jesus replied to them, "No matter where you are, you're to go to James the Just, for whose sake heaven and earth came into being."
They chose James the Just as overseer of Jerusalem.
James the Just is recorded to have been the first elected to the throne of the oversight of the church in Jerusalem.
The succession of the church passed to James, the brother of the Lord.
But when it comes to the Bible, you have to look very hard to uncover the truth about James's role as the first leader of Jesus' new movement.
The writing of James out of Christian history takes centuries, but it starts early. Where we first see it very clearly is in the Gospel of Luke in the book of Acts. Mark had mentioned the brothers of Jesus and even named them. Luke comes along, he's got Mark as a source, and he comes to the passage where Mark mentions the brothers and he just deep sixes it. It's gone, it's not there. Now he gets to the story of the early movement after the death of Jesus, book of Acts. It's got 28 chapters. By chapter 9, it's all Paul. Now, in those first chapters, James is mentioned a couple of times, and it's even acknowledged that he's the leader. But it's almost a grudging admission. Oh yes, there was this guy, James, he was in charge. But Paul came along, and that's who we're really interested in. That's the beginning of the story of the writing out of James, I think, from history. It's the New Testament itself, writes him out.
But there were certain events in James's life even the Bible writers could not ignore. 20 years after Jesus' death, the new movement faced a major crisis over its future. The question was, how strictly Jewish should it remain? All the church leaders were called to Jerusalem to decide the question. One man took the final decision.